Hi everyone, my name is Brittany Castro, and today on the Living Beyond Asana vlog, I am interviewing not one, but two amazing, awesome ladies. They're, in my opinion, true goddesses. They are the founders of Twin Tree Healing, and they are two sisters on a mission to shift the world towards more love. And they're doing this through a modern day approach to spiritual practices, including shamanism, connecting with angels, and all other kinds of mystical and magical workings of the world. Right? They are also the creators of the Twin Tree Healing channel on YouTube, and their most recent platform, Twin Tree TV, which is their platform to offer their workshops and their meditations and all the awesome stuff that they offer to a wider and broader audience. Okay, so I am so excited to introduce them to you right now. Ali and Greta.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi. Thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you.
So much for having us.
Thank you.
This is so exciting.
It's very exciting.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we should say that the way that this is, everything is just so magical and kind of mystical. The way that this all came together. So Greta and I actually went to college together many moons ago. And we were in English class together. Do you remember what English class?
I was trying to remember which class.
I don't remember.
Was Jess Christina our teacher by any chance?
I have no idea.
She was. She's another goddess who was amazing. I feel like she might have been.
Maybe. Yeah, I don't remember, but we were in an English class together, and then Greta is an amazing musician as well, and she wound up performing for a Take Back the Night event I did at Temple University.
You were amazing because you really encouraged me to do it, and I was terrified to do it, and stuff like that really played a part in me even doing music. Seriously.
That's beautiful.
Big time.
Oh wow, isn't it funny how you don't know how you
people.
Influence people?
Yeah,
right?
you were like, do it. I was like, all right. Yeah, it was a big thing.
We're already learning things. We didn't even get to our subject yet. Okay, so our subject today is self-care. Okay, which is, I think it's a really important and kind of vital connection to have when you're on the spiritual path.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, so what do you guys think? What's your definition of self-care?
Oh, God, that's a loaded question.
Yeah.
I think for the longest time, we were talking about self-care in our videos and didn't even realize that we were talking about it. And as the years have progressed, I think that self-care encompasses a lot of different things. I'm doing my dissertation right now on self-care, and so as of today, my definition of self-care is something that fills you up.
Yeah.
Is something that makes your heart sing. Is something that just fills you with bliss when you're feeling emptied and exhausted, or something that just keeps you going in your day-to-day life. It can be so many different things, and I think it's very, very personal to each person, but it's essential.
I almost find self-care and spirituality are almost one and the same. Usually self-care, or the lesson of needing to learn self-care, is what brings you to spirituality. I mean, I know for me that was, in my case, my experience in terms of that. I had to learn another way to be in the world from what was going on in my life, and self-care, if I had had those practices, I wouldn't have been in the position I'd been in. I can, share that or whatever, but
that's a really great point.
If I hadn't, then I wouldn't have learned those lessons.
Right.
So I think when people, we live in a crazy world, and I don't necessarily mean that in a way of we live in a crazy, you know what I mean? I try not as much as possible to speak in a spiritual term in the same hand, damn the world that we live in. It's not necessarily that. It's just looking at the reality of things. I was listening to something really interesting, this guy doing a talk about thyroid health and adrenal health and stuff like that. And he was talking about stress, and I thought he made a really, really interesting point where our bodies, people are like, oh, my adrenals are failing or my thyroid's failing or whatever, and my body's failing me. And really, actually, your body's protecting you. Because we live with so many different stimuli in our life. We've got the phone, we've got the TV, we've got the radio, we've got our, I already said the phone, but the phone again,
The phone, yeah, you can repeat the phone.
the phone, which I'm guilty of for sure. But, we have so much stimuli, and then the things we put into our body and all of that. Well, our bodies, if they didn't have that stress response, then we just wouldn't go forward. So when our body's doing that, it's actually protecting us. It's actually a very loving thing that's happening. And to me, that's really integral when you talk about self-care, because you've got to take that time to listen to those things and do the things that come into play to make sure that you can live the life that you want to live and not necessarily just bend to the way that the world is. We really, it's up to us to create how the world's going to be. And a big part of that is taking care of yourself and being like, hey, it's really cool if you take care of yourself, and cool of you, and cool of you.
I think that is so important.
We all then set the standard for everybody else. You don't feel so alone with like, I'm going to take Sunday off and just lay in bed because that's
or you don't feel so selfish. Like people always equate self-care to selfish.
And that was going to be one of my questions for sure. Yeah.
And
so why isn't it selfish?
Because we always talk about when you're on a plane and the stewardess is like, all right, before you put the oxygen mask on the person next to you, you have to put it on yourself. Because if you don't put it on yourself, then you're going to pass out and the person next to you is not going to get the help. So it's the same kind of thing. We have to restore ourselves. We have to fill ourselves up in order to give. And at the basis, at the fundamental level, humanity wants to connect and be with each other. And, we want to help each other. But in order for us really to help each other, we have to help ourselves first.
Yeah.
There was
Clean it up.
Sorry, I'm just like thinking of things.
No, go.
There was a TED Talk. It was really cool about self-compassion, I think. And she was talking about, I don't know, I listened to everything with like a philosophical, I'm like, oh, this is so related to this. She was saying, basically the studies are showing that we are, we function at our best. So I'm thinking, okay, this whole oxygen, scenario, right? So that would be me, if I'm trying to take care of everyone, I don't take care of myself, I'm not functioning at my best, which means I'm also not serving you well or whoever you may be trying to help. So no one's getting helped. So when you actually do things that are good for yourself, and you, as mammals, basically, we love the nurturing, we like, the warmth, and I always joke about, to be held, cuddle time, I'm a Cancer, so it's
Totally.
but that actually will lower our cortisol, which is our stress, and it raises our oxytocin, which is the feel good, oh, me kind of thing. But when we have that, we actually function better. So then it can serve you well, and serve you well, and serve you well. And so, that right there, again, if you look at the craziness of the messages that we're told that, you haven't done enough, you're not doing enough still, you're still not doing enough, you know what I mean? Then you're like, how you want to do enough? Well, to do enough, you've got to do enough for yourself first.
Yeah. And I think that goes into the connection of feeling that you are enough. Being enough.
Yeah.
I am enough. Right?
Absolutely.
That's always, and if you think about it, that's even can be where this all gets kind of spurred from this not being enough. So you always have to give and give and give and forget that you need to actually feed yourself and love yourself in order to, that you already are enough.
Right. And it's one of those things, I think when you talk about self-care and spirituality, a big part of that is making sure you hear the things that remind you that you are enough, because we're already given all of the messages that tell us. I was thinking about this earlier, or I was talking about this earlier today, and I was like, the only advertisement I can think of, Dove's doing a good job and everything, but let's say growing up, right, was "You're worth it," and the one was "You're worth it, dye your hair,"
totally.
So,
swinging the hair,
right,
worth it.
You're worth it. Put that makeup on. You're like, thanks.
Message.
But maybe that was an initial way to start the good stuff Dove was doing. But I think that, I don't know, I lost my train of thought, but that's basically where I was going with it.
Perfect. So I have another question for you.
Okay.
So let's get into a little bit more the nitty gritty of self-care practices. I would love to hear each of you a couple self-care practices you do, or just ones that you suggest, because some people are still probably but what is self-care, right? What is it really? Right. So what do you think?
One of the easiest things that I've come across in my research thus far is that I'm reading this amazing book about self-care for clinicians, but I think it pertains to everybody. It's by this guy, Dr. Wicks. And it's silence and solitude. So immediately when I say silence and solitude, I know in our workshops, and a lot of people come because they like meditation, but some who've never experienced silence or solitude are like, what, you want me to be quiet? I don't want to be quiet.
No.
Then I'm going to hear myself.
Yeah.
And so it's not about, I mean, it can be formal or it can be informal. So he equated it to when you finished a day at wherever you work, walking to your car or walking down the street. And that, not looking at the phone, not listening to music, but just having quiet time in those moments. That can be an informal way of just having some quiet to yourself where spirit and intuition can enter again.
Wow.
And or doing a guided meditation.
Yeah.
And or doing a traditional meditation.
Yeah.
Or a walking silent meditation.
those are
That's
great.
like heaven.
Yeah.
But I think that that's a great way to start because we're so not familiar with the idea of self-care that just getting to be with ourselves quiet for a little while is kind of a beginning and a reintroduction to ourselves.
Yeah. Like you're like shaking your head.
Right.
Right.
Nice to meet you. Right.
Wow.
I think something too something that Allie and I talk about constantly, because obviously we always bring to the table whatever we've gone through in our life is what we usually talk about.
Right.
Yeah.
If there's anything that's important to us, exactly. I mean, like that's the nature of what we do. But I say that to say that being gentle is like Allie and I, like if you say like, what do you guys teach? Like how to be gentle to yourself while you're doing all this stuff, because there's so much, like I'm thinking quiet, like, okay, I'm gonna be quiet, okay. But I love what you're saying about it, especially because it's like a few minutes here and there. There are no rules. It's not going to work the same way for everybody. And again, that's sort of putting the thought process of like the culture. This is the way it has to be, you know.
Right.
And you
on
have to
top
do
of
it perfect.
spirituality.
Yes.
Yeah,
If you don't do it perfect, it's not going to work.
Right.
Right, exactly. So like we like initially when we did like we write guided meditations, we made one that was like 2 minutes long, and like in the morning for me, one of my self-care, because I used to wake up and be like you know, every morning.
What do I have to do?
Yeah. What's wrong already? You know, like I'm like, oh my god.
Okay. So we were in the middle of our interview, and my camera only records for like 12 minutes. In the beginning, I was like, we're only going to do like 10 minutes. And we were like, but this is really good stuff, so I'm okay with it. So we're just going to carry on. Okay, so continue, Allie.
So what I was saying before we actually started recording was just another just very informal way of dealing or working self-care in with silence and solitude is just to step outside. Like we were talking about how beautiful the weather has been this week, and we have bird feeders, and I, in the middle of like when I'm writing or studying or something, I'll be like, okay, I'm feeling drained, I need to stop, and I'll go outside and feed the birds. You know, like it's something as simple as that.
Yeah.
Whatever, and I think what's going to make it easier is things that make you happy. So if you wake up in a funk, put your favorite music on.
Yes.
Like we were talking about Missy Elliott. Like, Missy Elliott.
Yeah.
We were dancing to that on the way here.
Work it out.
And that's a great way of doing self-care because that completely shifts the energy and your attitude for the day. It can be really creative.
Yeah, so it's about shifting the energy.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think also it's about creating boundaries too. You know, like in the morning, like I used to have my phone next to my bed. Now my phone's downstairs, so that when I wake up, I don't look at it.
Oh, that's a great idea.
Yeah, that's Ariana Huffington. I can't take credit for that. Thank you, Ariana Huffington. That was her. I put it downstairs now, but I still feel that pull to go, even that far away. I'm like, I gotta go get the phone and look at it.
Yeah.
But instead, I create these boundaries of like, no, I'm going to read my book, and I'm just gonna. So I have a book I always read. It's on my nightstand, and when I wake up in the morning, I actually, instead of like, unless I have like a class to go to or something like that, but usually I have some time. I'm like, I'm gonna read my book. And take like, sometimes I read it for like an hour, and just to like, oh, this is me time.
That's fantastic.
And it's kind of like I'm putting my foot down to like all of the things in my head that, because I know once I get started, I'm gonna be in it,
right?
And I'm not gonna
totally
have
understand.
it.
Yeah,
I'm gonna try that. I like that a lot. It's great.
Yeah, my mornings have evolved like that. Like I said, I used to wake up like, and then I usually take. So I'm like, I'm gonna listen to this meditation. And then I sit and I watch the birds eat, and I like coffee, and the cat's in my lap, and I'm like, I'm happy. Usually lasts about an hour, but it's great. Because I know exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
I know I will work, pretty much straight through the day, and to take those breaks. Oh, something I've been doing, we did together was just like somebody was telling me about this, and it's not like this totally, but I love it. You set like a timer. It's like a 20-minute timer because otherwise, like just how fast can I get this thing done? And like, so I'm staying on task, I get it done, and then 20 minutes you get up and you do something else and just kind of like shake your body around or whatever. But boundaries, absolutely. It's funny that we didn't even say boundaries because Allie and I are talking about boundaries all the time.
I've seen some videos talking about boundaries.
Yeah, boundaries is such a huge thing. I think, and again, it's like being allowed, it's like, you have to find that place in you to know that, or just trust that there is that place. Even if you don't feel it right now, just trust that there might be a little spot where you can be like, you know what, to that person who's draining you, I'm not saying that they're like the evil henchman of the century, but like, maybe they mean totally fine, but their energy is just not jiving with you at that moment. And it's okay to have those boundaries. And I think that that's something that, especially as women, we're taught to be so polite and so like welcoming and I'll take it for you, come on here, and sometimes you're just like, I just can't. And to learn how to do those things in a way where it's not after you've reached your limit. You set those boundaries.
Important.
I think even though self-care and boundaries were something that I sort of hit a wall with health-wise, which brought me to spirituality basically back, when I was younger. I think, our mom really modeled that well for us, though, growing up, where she would be like, she's a doctor, and like growing up, she was going through medical school and all that when we were really young. And she was really good about at least modeling to us, like, you know what, I'm tired. Like, not right now, I can't do. And it was nice to see that from a woman.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think it was
odd.
It was
at the
odd.
time.
Yeah. Because
but
we picked up
now
some
looking
things.
back, we're like, wow, that was a really great example for it.
Yeah. Because we would do it. I remember like just doing that myself, and people were like, you what? I'm like, this is what I do. I'm not doing that right now. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
But yeah, just setting those kind of boundaries absolutely is so important.
Yeah, I agree. I'm that's one thing like I've learned, like you have to say no sometimes, and and sometimes you'll hurt people's feelings, and it's for the best of both of you though, because if you're putting toxic energy into whatever you're doing, it's a waste of time.
And I think one of the best ways to understand, like, oh, this is a boundary that does not feel comfortable. When I used to do spiritual sessions for Reiki, when I started resenting the experience, I knew that I was so tapped out. It wasn't the person in front of me. It was I was so tapped out. I was so drained that I hadn't taken care of myself. And that resentment, like, what am I doing good? Even though I'm giving Reiki, like, what am I doing good for this? And so then I knew, like, wow, healthy boundary for myself. I need to just do self-care now. So that can be a great way to flag yourself when you are still trying to figure out what healthy boundaries are.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Okay, so this was amazing. Like, before we keep going,
I know. I was like thinking, and then this,
and then that. So I think the biggest takeaway is that self-care doesn't need to be this big, crazy undertaking, right? You don't have to have a certain amount of money to do it. You don't have to have any certain equipment. You can just be who you are in your space, in your body, and you can give yourself a little bit of love, a little bit of compassion, a little bit of stillness. It's just about that.
It doesn't need to be any set thing. It's really about, we all have to be here to discover who we really are.
Yes.
That's the ultimate goal.
Totally, especially when you're on the spiritual path of transformation.
Right.
It's so vital.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I want to hear from you now. So head over to the vlog and let me know, what are your spiritual, or not spiritual, but self-care practices? Spiritual self-care practices.
Yes.
I guess they are spiritual.
Yeah.
What do you like to do? And maybe what is something that you've tried that doesn't work? What is something that you've tried that does work, right? Because the more that we share these things, the more that we will have these tools to move forward. Okay, so I want to thank Allie and Greta. This was so fun.
So fun.
Yeah, this was awesome. Hopefully they will be back at some point. Talk about more stuff. And I will see you guys next week. Thank you.
Bye.